Hey, friends. Before we dig into today's so amazing episode, I mean, seriously, my mind is so blown by this conversation with Kelsey McKenna. She's the host of Being a Mom is Hard, and it is, oh my gosh, speaks to my soul. She has these guests on who are just moms, any kind of regular mom or, a mindset expert like myself or whatever. Like, all kinds of moms come on and share their stories of what they've been through, what they've experienced, and it just builds such a great community of knowing you're not alone. All right. Some of your friends, your family, the people closest to you might not be opening up and sharing that they've struggled with anything like what you're struggling with. But there are so many women all across the world who've had the same struggles as you. And that's why I love this podcast, just getting out there on the internet where everyone is available and finding the people who fit your experience. So definitely check out Kelsey McKenna's podcast, Being a Mom is Hard. She's here today. Listen to this episode. I've got all the links in the description for you to find her and track her down and get to know her and listen to all these amazing stories. All right. And I'm so excited for you to hear that. But first, being a mom is hard. It fits the being a mom is hard, but it doesn't have to be hard all the time. Okay. It's tough, but you're tougher. And I gotta say, I have been invited to take part in this epic mom life giveaway. It is the ultimate level up your mom life giveaway hosted by Alicia Cohen Designs. And it is 46 other creators like and myself. My stuff's in there. Happy Mom Method is in there. It's a giveaway and we have over $20,000 worth of donated items up for winning. We're picking 15 winners who are winning prize packs of about $1,000 to $2,000 value a piece. So I'm putting a link in the description to sign up for that. If you don't have a clickable link, go onto my Instagram. It's in my link in bio. Um, Definitely sign yourself up for this giveaway because you've got nothing to lose, honestly, and so much to potentially gain. So go check that out, my friend. But also keep listening because I cannot wait for you to meet my new friend, Kelsey. For as long as I can remember, they've been telling us to enjoy it while they're young, but our days are filled with chaos and stress and cooking and endless laundry piles. Where's the time to enjoy it? Yeah, that's what I always thought too. There's so much I have to do. When do I find time for peace and joy and happiness when I barely have time to sleep? Mama, it's time to make shift happen. You can be a happy mom. If I can, you can. Trust me. I've been a mess. I've been depressed. I've been overwhelmed. I've been to the bottom of the pits and I've risen. I've grown. I've bloomed. And it all started when I realized I didn't have to anything. I get to. It is my privilege and my honor and my divine responsibility to be the queen of my home. It's not a burden. I'm not a burden. I'm in charge. I'm the ruler. I'm the chaos coordinator. I'm the calm in the storm. And so are you. Come with me. Let's rise, mamas. Adjust your crown. Accept your responsibility. Change the effing world together. It's all in the way we choose to see it. I'm so glad you're here, friend. You're listening to Meant to Bloom with Brittany Clarkson. Hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to the Meant to Bloom podcast. I'm so glad you're here with us today. Today, I have an amazing guest on who has just some amazing things to share with us. Kelsey McKenna, she has a brand new podcast called Being a Mom is Hard. And I am just so all here for it. She is sharing all of these stories from so many different moms all over the place. And I can't wait for you guys to find out about this and hear about this and go jump over there and follow her and subscribe and rate and review and all that good stuff. But let's let her tell us all about this stuff today. I wanted to interject and make sure I said this is how we take the big, scary aloneness away from our pain and share our strength with others. I'm so all for you sharing your story, friend. And let's meet Kelsey. Kelsey, tell us about you and why you're here, why you're doing this. And I'm just so excited to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that kind introduction. And by the way, second episode is your very own Brittany Clarkson. It's you. So yes, thank you so much for sharing your story already, which was such a great episode. I got so much good feedback on that. So, but yes, I'm Kelsey McKenna. I just launched my podcast like 2 weeks ago, I think. 2 weeks ago. It's been a blur. But it's called Being a Mom is Hard. And right now, what I'm sharing through the podcast is just stories. And I'm interviewing moms, just regular moms, any mom, about their journey toward becoming a mom and then that transition into motherhood and how motherhood has been for them so far. So not only what's been hard about it, but also what they enjoy, what they love, what stands out to them from those different phases of their journey. So it's been really great so far. I did do a big chunk of interviews before I released the first episode. I think I've done like 17 or 18 maybe at this point, and I've released four. So I released two a week. And it's been really interesting, honestly. So I never have done any podcasting before launching this podcast. But I had been interested in podcasting for a while. I love listening to podcasts. And my mom and I were actually considering doing a podcast together at one point. So I had kind of like looked into podcasting, but we decided not to do that. And then all of a sudden one day I had a really tough day and with my kids, and I say that it wasn't tough like something major happened. It was one of those days where it just feels very, very, very long. And I was not showing up the way I want to show up. And I was feeling guilty and like shameful and all of those things and just exhausted, of course. And then the idea just came to me to start the podcast and just help share mom stories and try to kind of give a more realistic depiction, I guess, of what motherhood is today instead of kind of that curated, what you might see on social media from some accounts out there that make it look a little bit maybe easier or more put together than it might
Mhm.
actually be. So yeah, that's the basis of the podcast, but or the reason I started it. But I'm a mom of three. Probably should have said that. Three girls. They are 4.5, 2.5, and 8 months old right now. And I yeah, I have a husband. We've been married 5 years, so I've been either pregnant or breastfeeding since a month into our marriage until now, like 5.5 years ago. So it's been quite a ride. But yeah, so I love my kids. It's great. I'm grateful. I'm all the things, but it's also, it can be hard. And I don't think that that should be something that women are afraid to say because there are so many other things. Like, think about it, feels almost shameful to me to say being a mom is hard. And a lot of people were like, why are you naming it that? Like, that is a very aggressive name. And I was like, I feel like this is my calling card. Like, if you see the name and you're turned off, you probably shouldn't listen to the podcast because it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. But I think it's something where there are so many other hard things that are widely accepted to be hard, and nobody feels shameful saying that it's hard. Like, think of like becoming a doctor or climbing Mount Everest or like things that people would look at and be like, that's a hard thing to do. And if someone said while they were doing it that it was hard, no one would be like, okay, but are you grateful? Oh, are you saying you don't want to do this? But for some reason with motherhood, I've seen that over and over again in my own life, but also on social media. So that's that's why the name is what it is and kind of the inspiration behind it.
Yeah. I'm actually glad you mentioned that because when I first heard the name of your podcast, I was like, "Oh, I'm not all for that at all," because I have worked so hard to, like, create a mindset in myself that's like, "No, it doesn't have to be hard." And the more, like, I followed you and got to know you and you invited me on, and I'm like, "But the woman who, like, needs to hear it right now is in total agreement that
Yeah.
being a mom is hard." And she
Yeah.
needs to hear these stories to know she's not alone and, like, just to build this community of, I'm not on my own, here's my village,
Yeah.
and that's
It's
how you can
tricky.
overcome it being so hard, like,
Yeah,
It is,
but
it's
it's
tough.
tricky because it's like you don't wanna dwell in the hard. Like, I think about this almost every day as I'm promoting it. It's like, if I sit here and I think too much about how it's hard, then I'm gonna fixate on the hard things. But it's also, I think,
Mhm.
unhealthy to be so the other way where you're, like, in denial, and that's why I'm trying to kind of build this idea or, like, hard is not bad. Hard doesn't necessarily mean that it's negative, that your experience is negative, but I feel like with other things that are hard, there's not that same I feel like we've almost built up in our society this idea that motherhood has to either like come naturally or you need to be so grateful every moment that like or so appreciative every moment that you
Mhm.
don't ever say the words or you don't ever mention that it's hard, but I feel like you can be grateful and something can also be hard, just like if you were going through like a really difficult like training for the Olympics or something that would be hard, like you could be so happy that your body allows you to do that. You could be so grateful. You could be at every moment turning around being like, wow, I'm so lucky. But you could also be saying, yeah, and I'm so lucky to do this hard thing. Like this is tough and I'm doing it. Like almost motivating, you know? So I'm trying most of my journey of doing this is for me and for people like me, where it's like I want to be able to acknowledge that it's hard and not be in this like guilt shame spiral when I think that, but then also have the gratefulness and everything you talk about on this podcast and through your story. I want to be able to hold both of those things together. But it's hard. It's a hard balance because you don't want to slip too far like into
Mhm.
toxic positivity or slip too far into this like dark, like this is so bad and hard is negative. You know, you don't want to do that either. So it's
Mhm.
definitely a balance. And I
For
think about
sure.
it all the time where I'm like, I know I'm turning people off with this name, but I'm keep keep pushing, keep putting it out there and try to say, I'm not saying like let's dwell and like commiserate or whatever word you want to use.
Right.
Yeah.
No, yeah. No, I mean, the name definitely speaks to the right person that you need to call
Yeah.
in. And if it doesn't speak to them, like, immediately, if they stick around, if they hear someone else
Yeah.
who's been on
Yeah.
it, they're like, "Wait a second. Oh, I get what you mean by it. Okay, I judged it too fast."
Yeah.
Um,
Hopefully.
yeah. But yeah, no, I for sure I love it now, now that I
Mhm.
understand behind it, and I'm like, "No," because the person who hears it and immediately is like, "Yeah, that's for me. I agree." They're the one who need it the most. They're gonna
Yeah.
be like,
It's a
"Yeah."
calling card. It's like calling you in. Like if
Mhm,
you are feeling this right now, this might be a place. Because most, almost every story, I think every story I've shared so far and every interview I've done so far has been a very uplifting story. None of these stories have been like your story. Like there are times in your story where it's like, yeah, this is a hard moment. Like, and when you look at it over the arc, and that's what's so interesting is as women reflect back on the arc of their story, if they're not someone who does that for a profession or for their own podcast or their own blog, you see them kind of putting these pieces together too, which is very interesting, where they're like looking back and saying, oh, now that I'm reflecting, that was such a hard time and I didn't even realize all these other things that were at play or all these other things that came later. So it's really interesting to see too the women who are called to share their story. It's almost always a very uplifting and positive message that's coming out of it, and a
I
message
love
of
that.
hope, you know. And it does get better, and it does get easier, and there are ways to cope better, you know.
Absolutely, yes. You were mentioning themes, that's one of the themes you were
Yeah.
mentioning you're seeing with all these moms sharing with you their stories.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that's a theme I've seen is definitely I think when you're especially early motherhood, like and I'm in early motherhood now, like and I haven't been through this yet because I haven't gotten out yet of early motherhood. But when it seems like when I'm interviewing moms who are a little further along in their journey, they are looking back and they're able to really have such a like a positive perspective on it because they have kind of gotten out and they can see, oh, that was really hard for me. And this is like how my life all came together, or this is how my community came together, or this is how I shifted my mindset, or this is how I changed my perspective. Like all of these, whatever it is in their life, they can kind of see what pulled them out of it once they're out of it. But when you're in it, it just like you're like feeling around in the dark, kind of like, what? How am I leaving this phase of my life, you know, without just like, you know, white knuckling and trying to like get through. So it is that's a theme I've seen for sure is people is women kind of putting back together the pieces as they look back and reflect on it and actually tell their story, especially like I said, if they haven't done that. I've also really seen a theme of isolation come up in almost every I think there might only be maybe 2 out of the 18 I've done where isolation and loneliness hasn't come up in some form, especially when they're talking about the transition into motherhood, and those really early days postpartum, first few years.
Mhm.
That has come up in almost every interview I've done, which speaks to, you know, how big of a deal that is right now in our society, and how so many women do feel like they don't have that community, they don't have the support, their spouse doesn't understand them, their friends don't get it if they may have dealt with, you know, loss, or, you know, infertility, or a really difficult pregnancy, or a really difficult postpartum depression, like all of these different things that happen. I think a lot of times there's like the version online that you can find, and then there's like the real people. And a lot of women, I think they are missing the real people part of,
Mhm.
um, that, like, that community and that way to battle, I guess, loneliness and isolation and everything that comes along with that, you know. So that's another
Absolutely.
theme. Mhm.
Yeah, and that's partly why I think like this podcast that you've got is so important because it shares like those deeper stories that you would only hear from someone close to you.
Mhm.
But the people who are closest to you might not be going through the same type of thing as you at all, and they probably aren't.
Yeah.
Like, from my
Especially not at the same
experience.
time. Yeah.
Mhm. Right, like, what we see as, like, our influences, like, for me, especially, it's like, okay, I have, for all my mom support and, like, mom advice and stuff, it's like, if I'm not turning to, like, podcasts and things where people are getting real, then you have social media where it's pretty curated and people are sharing what they're sharing.
Mhm.
Um, and then you have, like, a lot of accounts that try to share, like, the real moments, but we're not really sharing all of the real moments all of the time because
Yeah.
the whole internet, for
Yeah.
one thing. And then the people closest to me are, like, my mom,
Mhm.
who is a totally different generation. Raising kids in the 90s and 80s was totally different than it is now.
Yeah.
So, her advice isn't always super applicable, and it's like, I know you're trying to help, but that's not how we do things anymore at all. So,
Mhm.
who do I turn to? Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and
and
it's
then,
hard to be that far away from it, like, with mothers. I'm very close to my mom, and I've joked
mhm,
with her about this time and time again, but she forgets, like, some of the harder things, because when you're that far, it's kinda like you give birth and then, like, you go to have your next kid and you're like, "That wasn't so bad," and then you're in it, you're like, "This is horrible," you know? People always describe that. I've had C-sections, so it's not the same thing, but I've had that described to me. But yeah, it's kinda like that where, like, I tell my
mhm,
mom, "Oh, I'm, like, losing my hair postpartum again," or some little thing, and she's like, "Oh, I don't remember that happening." And then I'm like, am I crazy? Am I the only person losing my hair, in postpartum? So it's like little things too, where you just feel like,
right,
it feels big to you in the moment. But when you look back, if you're that far out, you don't remember it necessarily, or it's not the same. So I totally get
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, we're going through that a lot with my mom right now is, like, she doesn't remember potty training kids, and she doesn't understand why some of my kids are having, like, a hard time deciding to potty train,
Yeah.
and I'm like, "Well, mom, you don't remember because it wasn't, like it's not that big of a thing, like, in the end, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, the
In the
kid went
arc
from
of
diapers
life.
to potty train, and you don't when you're in
Yeah.
it, it feels like it's a big,
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
it feels really tough. When you're
Yeah, for
over it, you're
sure.
just like, "Yeah, my kid potty trained, like, it happened, it's done, it's over," and then you don't
Yeah.
lock those memories away forever, 30, 40 years from now. It
Yeah,
doesn't really matter
totally.
how you potty trained your kid. So, yeah, you're gonna forget the method of how it went and all the accidents that happened, so
Yeah,
I'm, like,
totally.
convinced all of us kids just went from, like, diapers to underwear, and there was no potty training, like, that happened. I'm like, "Okay, mom, I remember peeing my pants in kindergarten, so
Yeah,
I
no,
was there.
definitely. It
I know I
definitely it happened somehow. Yeah, somehow there was
she's
potty
like, "I
training.
think it happened one time," and I'm like, "No, I definitely had accidents."
Yeah, no,
So let's cut
totally.
my kids some slack.
And I mean, in some ways, that's nice to hear, because once you're that far away from it, unless something very big happens, you're probably not even going to remember it. But then at the same time, it does feel a little bit invalidating if, like, you feel like, hey, like, no one even realizes that this is a tough thing, you know? And I feel like, yeah, it's also like the life stages that you're, or not the life stages, but I should say, like, what type of life you have. So, like, if you're like, my mom was a full-time working mom, both my parents worked full-time, and that's how I was after my first daughter, and then I became a stay-at-home mom during COVID, and so I was going through that. And it's like, what I realized when the idea came to me for the podcast is, it's always going to be hard. It's kind of like how people say pick your hard. Like, there's always going to be something that's hard, and it doesn't really matter what your situation is, if you stay home, if you are, of course you want to find the right mix for you and your family, but it doesn't mean like, I guess I want to show more of the nuance. It's not this like black and white thing. It's not like it's all hard. It's not like it's all easy and coming up daisies and rainbows and all of that. It's like it's very nuanced today where you have almost like too many options. You know what I mean? It's not this cookie cutter like, okay, you either are a working mom, and if you're a working mom, then what you do is you drive away from the house and you go and you work in an office or you work at a store or whatever. It's like you could be a full-time working mom staying home. Like I know a mom who works full-time hours and has her kids at home the whole time. She doesn't even have childcare and her husband works outside of the home. Or you could be that traditional, like you're leaving the home and you're going out, or you could be staying home, or you could be staying home and you're nannying someone else's kid. Like there's just so many different like ways of being a family now, I guess. And also your spouse, what are they doing if you have one? What is their work situation? And so much of that comes into play when we think about in our society how few support systems are in place for a mom. Like when she's in postpartum, when she's in, your spouse could be going back to work a week after you have a C-section. You could be going back to work a week after. I interviewed a mom who went back to being a waitress 2 weeks after having an emergency C-section. She's literally waiting tables, carrying food, and she's not even
Yes.
supposed to be walking that much. You know what I mean? So there's just so much variety. And I think this like overall messaging of like, well, you should be so grateful to have kids. Yes, and like practicing gratefulness helps, but it's not helpful to just like shove that down someone's throat who's like going through it in that moment. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because there might not be support systems in place for that person. They might not have community. They might not have access to like mental health care or even physical, like just regular healthcare. Like there's so many things that can be going on. So I guess that's another theme is I do think the interviews show the nuance of like, okay, no matter what your situation is, there are periods that feel really hard. There are periods that feel like, yes, I'm got this, I'm doing this. So that's definitely something that I wouldn't say it's a theme, but it's something that I've noticed in doing the interviews and listening back to them. It's just like how gray it is. It's not black and white. It's not clear cut. Um, I
Hmm.
hope that
Yeah.
makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And what I'm thinking as you're saying that is like there's so many different options out there for us. And what's coming to me is that there's no right way to do motherhood. And when there's
Mhm.
no like one right way, everything you do can feel like it's the wrong choice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's exactly, I think, what has happened. That's, I think, part of why this idea came to me was like, it's almost like I thought, oh, this is hard because I'm working really too many hours. Like, I am in a corporate job. I'm away from my kids too much. I am too busy. That's why this is hard. I know. I will stop. I will. We don't have to have it all. I'm going to stop. I'm going to be a full-time stay-at-home mom and do focus on this. Oh, wait, that's also really hard, almost harder for me at least than what I was doing before. Okay, I'll do part-time. I will do freelance work. I'm going to be part-time. It's almost like I thought if I like put the pieces of the puzzles together in the perfect way that it would suddenly become easier. But no, it's just hard no matter what. Like it's different types of hard depending, and it's more so about mindset. It's for me at least, it's more so about mindset. It's more so about how I approach the day, taking care of myself, like all these other things that are true regardless of like what I'm actually doing in my life. And I'm like I should say, I'm a very, I don't have it that hard at all. Like I haven't gone through a period of like deep struggle. I haven't had major mental health issues. I haven't had major like infertility issues or huge amounts of grief that I was trying to process while raising my kids. I have a partner, like I have a support system, I have a loving family, like all of those things are true. So I'm saying this like from that perspective. And I think that's part of what drove me to want to actually execute upon the idea was I was like, if this is this hard for me and I have this flexibility and I have this support system and I am just kind of like a normal woman living in today's
Hmm.
society, then this is hard for, I'm sure, everyone, like this is just must be a global thing, for everyone, every mom that I know at least.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
No, I can totally relate. Like on paper, my whole motherhood journey has been so simple and easy. And
Mhm.
like, 'cause that's on paper though.
Yeah.
And then when I was not working on mental health or mindset at all, and I was just letting, just riding those waves of depression and anxiety and coming up for air and being happy for a little bit at a time, like, I felt so guilty for how hard it all felt. Because I'm
Yeah.
like, my life in perspective to other people's lives is so easy.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah, I
wasn't
felt the
looking
same
at my
way.
life like from a gratitude standpoint at all. I
Mhm.
was just looking at like this is easy. People have it harder than me. This shouldn't feel hard for me.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, I beat myself up for that a lot. And that just made, the whole mindset and mental health stuff way worse. Um,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
definitely if you're listening to stories of other women who've gone through more than you and have it like what feels like harder than you to have it, and you're feeling like, guilty for it not feeling easier, um, like definitely let go of that guilt because it's all a matter of perspective. Um,
Mhm.
what is it? I've seen like a picture where it's like it's like just because someone else can carry the weight better than you doesn't mean it's not heavy for you.
Yeah, totally. It's kinda like when you're little, I don't know if your parents did this, but, like, when I was little, if I wouldn't finish my food or if I was complaining about dinner, they'd be like, "There are kids starving in Africa." It's kinda like that idea where
Mhm.
it's like, there's always gonna be someone who has it harder, there's probably always gonna be someone who has it easier, but, like, thinking about it that way, at least for me, doesn't help me with my perspective. You know what I mean? Like it almost makes
Mhm.
it worse because of the guilt. And when I'm feeling guilty, then I'm feeling like frustrated and I'm feeling like bitter almost toward myself and toward like my situation, I guess, if that makes sense. And like that doesn't help me. Um, it doesn't make it feel easier. It makes it feel harder because my mind is not in the right place, I guess. I feel like almost like forcing it to feel easy. This is kind of like hard versus easy. It's like not hard versus grateful or it's almost like I kind of just wish that we could change and stop thinking like, oh well, if you say it's hard, then that means that you must not appreciate it enough. It's like no, it's like I have days that are easy where I'm like, I got this, like this is so easy, and then I have days where I'm like, wow, I am so sleep deprived, I am so tired, like I can't even function, like I can't even be myself, and now I feel bad and I also feel guilty for that. And it's like, why can't I get my kids to sleep better? Why? Like all of those things that you think, I just feel like that makes it way harder. And just knowing that it's going to be like some days are going to be hard, some days are going to be easy. That's okay. That is not like that's just accepted. That's like table stakes. And we don't need to be like constantly feeling adding the guilt of, oh, this feels hard today. So now I'm feeling guilty that it feels hard. It's like, no, I can just accept that some days are going to be like that. You know, it's kind of like when I accepted that my kids were not going to sleep and suddenly it felt easier to be up at night whereas before when I was trying to force them, no, they are going to be good sleepers. You know, that made me really stressed because I was like just trying so hard to force something that wasn't going to, ever really happen, I guess, unless I was going to go hardcore, like cry it out sort of thing. So it's kind of like that
Mhm.
for me, I guess. Is like just accepting it and like rolling with the punches a little more has really helped me. Um, but I can't say that's a theme really. I would say themes with the interviews definitely more are about like community and the gratitude, I would say, is a theme. A lot of women like the "this too shall pass" quote that has come up a lot. That idea of like the hard stuff is going to pass, and the easy stuff and the stuff that you're super into and that you love and that's so cute, that's also going to pass. Like that has come up probably. I'd say like at maybe 10 of the interviews. So I feel like that's a lot for.
Yeah.
It's probably like the number one piece of advice that's come out of all of the episodes.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, I feel a little bit hung up on that whole like our parents at dinner
Yeah.
telling us that like you need to eat your food because there's starving kids in Africa. I think maybe that like screwed up our whole generation a little bit
Yeah.
because I'm seeing now as you told that whole story how I have applied that into motherhood subconsciously.
Oh yeah.
Like, okay, me eating overstuffing myself on all this food, it's not going to feed the kids in Africa who are starving, for one
Yeah.
thing. And now I feel guilty that I don't want to like appreciate what I have
Yeah.
when someone else wishes they had it. Um,
Yeah, it's totally like that.
I'm
That's
like,
exactly
okay.
how I feel. I feel like that's how, like, for example, in my life, I was very scared I was going to have fertility issues because one of my best friends had major fertility issues before I even got married. And I was very intimately aware of her journey. And so when my husband and I started trying, we got pregnant in the first month. And I had a pretty tough pregnancy. I was like throwing up the whole time. I was like hospitalized because I was so like throwing up so much. It was like hypermetus. I can't even say the word, the over morning sickness. And then my hips
Mhm.
started to separate and I couldn't walk by the end of pregnancy. But the whole time I was just feeling so bad that I wasn't more grateful to be in the middle of pregnancy because I was like, I have this baby in me and like I am so lucky. And I logically knew that. And in those moments, but it doesn't take away the fact that I like couldn't keep food down for 20 weeks. It doesn't take away the fact that, you know what I mean? So I feel the same way that like that mentality of like you got to eat because kids are starving in Africa, and like same with like, oh well, if I was having a hard time in a sport, well you're lucky you even got to do this sport. Some kids don't get to do sports because they don't have the money to do sports, and like always trying to force that gratefulness. And I
Mhm.
think that once I started realizing, okay, I can like say that this whatever I'm going through is hard and still be grateful. I think that's what really like shifted for me. And it only came in like the last probably year of my motherhood. And I'm still working on it. I still feel really shitty when, sorry, I just cut.
That's fine.
I
That's
still
good.
feel really bad when I think like, oh my gosh, why am I not more grateful? Like if I'm up breastfeeding and then I'm like, I'm so lucky to be breastfeeding because I wanted to breastfeed and I'm able to breastfeed. But like also when I breastfeed, it means that my husband's not taking those night shifts as much, you know what I mean? And I'm so tired and that's also hard, And so I still have those moments where I'm like, God, Kelsey, like just stop. Some people can't breastfeed. Some people don't have kids. And I just really, really am trying right now to hold both and to be like, no, yes, I'm lucky. And this is hard for me because if I don't ever acknowledge that it's hard, I can't figure out ways to cope better. If I'm in constant denial of the hard thing, I can't cope with it. You know what I mean? Because I'm not even acknowledging that it's like a legitimate thing that I need to strategize and figure out how to navigate better. So I think that that has been a huge thing for me that's kind of underlying this whole project. And then hearing everyone talk about it, like there is so much talk about the guilt, there is so much talk about shame and like stuff with like yelling or things that nowadays are like not good. You know what I mean? Not good for your
Mhm.
kid, or there's studies, there's a lot that goes into it where it's like everything needs to be qualified. Like I'm grateful and also like this thing. So it's super hard to do though. It's really hard for me to just like hold both and to be okay with like admitting to myself that this isn't like coming naturally or this isn't just the easiest thing I've ever done. It's really hard for me to admit that.
Yeah. Um, the most rewarding things in life are not the easiest.
I know they're the hard things, right?
So, yeah, let's
So
embrace
like,
motherhood can be really hard because it's like the most rewarding thing that we're
yeah,
here doing right now.
yeah, like if ever like if you didn't do hard things in your life, like think where you would be. So like that's what I guess that's what I was trying to say at the beginning. What you just said is exactly what I was trying to say. It's like all these other things that are hard. Like if I was like climbing Mount Everest and I turned and I said, "Oh, this is super hard, this climb," and I had been preparing my whole life, like for years, I had been preparing to climb it. It's my dream to reach the top of Mount Everest, and I turn to my partner and say, "This is really hard right now. This is a hard part of this climb." They would never say back to me, you are so lucky that you have legs. You are just like, what is wrong with you? That they would never say that because they know it's
Right.
hard, but that's why we're doing it. That's why it's worth it. It's okay that it's hard. We know that going into it. Do you know what I mean? So I just think it's so strange that motherhood is the only thing I could think of really that I feel that way about. That when someone says it or when someone admits it, I'm like, oh, like why? Like, well, how can you say that about your babies? But every other thing, like if I talk to, I have so many people in my life who are doing hard things that are not related to having children, and if they were to come to me and be like, "God, I'm going through like a rough patch with this," I'd be like, "I totally get it. It's really hard to have a start, like to build a company. That's hard. I totally get that. That's hard. Oh, that's hard to lose your job. Oh, that's hard to, like it's so normalized in other areas that I guess I wish it were more normalized in motherhood because then we could do exactly what you just said. Like, we could just be like, yeah, and we fucking got this. Like, we're,
Yeah.
like, we're doing it. Like, we're doing a hard thing. And it could be a more positive experience, even in the hard moments, maybe. I mean, that's my hypothesis. Again, I'm not a specialist in anything, but that's my guess. That's what I would hope.
Was there anything last that you like feel like the mamas here need to make sure that they hear?
No, I mean, I will mention
I
just
mean, we
because
said it.
I'm shamelessly plugging the podcast, so I will
Um,
mention I am thinking about doing some episodes with I'm not only doing just one-on-one mom interviews, but also doing maybe like panel conversations with moms who have all gone through a similar experience. So maybe doing something that's more themed in that way, and also bringing on a couple different specialists in areas that are, related to some of the things that have come up in the first big round of episodes. So that is something else that may be offered in the future, hopefully, if it all works out and I can keep it up, keep the momentum. So I will mention that. But no, I mean, thank you so much for having me and letting me share about what I'm up to, and for sharing your story again. It was great. I got a lot of really positive feedback from hearing about your journey as
I'm
well.
really glad to hear that.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm a big advocate for sharing your story, share your journey so that people don't know you're on your own. Because isolating and thinking that like you're the only person going through this, you're the only one struggling is probably like the most dangerous thing you can do to your own mental health is
Yeah.
just not building that community and seeing like other people have done this before. Yeah, motherhood is hard, but I can do it.
Yeah. Yes.
Um,
I
it's
love it.
tough, but I'm tougher.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough,
Um,
but we knew it's tough, but like we got this.
Absolutely. Okay, my friends, I'm gonna make this super easy for you, and I will link Kelsey's show in the show description of this episode for you, so you can find her easy. If you don't like the platform that I plug it on, it is Being a Mom is Hard. You can look it up anywhere. And do
Yes.
not forget when you're over there to rate and review her show while you're there. That is super important for podcasters. So please make sure that you reach out and like tell her how much you love her show, please. And also go ahead and reach out to Kelsey if you have a story that you feel like you really need to share,
Yes.
because I'm sure she will be receptive to that.
Yes. If you want to share, just send me a message, send me an email, I have a form on my website, whatever you got to, whichever way you prefer.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here
All right.
today.
Thank you.
Hey, beautiful. I hope you thoroughly enjoyed this episode with Kelsey McKenna, and I hope you go and check out her podcast, Being a Mom is Hard. And speaking of which, you remember that giveaway I mentioned at the beginning? Don't forget to go get entered. There are multiple ways to enter. Just go ahead, click that link in my description, and go get yourself entered to win some of these amazing resource bundles. Ah, it's so freaking exciting. Like, I cannot wait to find out who wins. I hope one of my listeners wins some of these. But also, I got to remind you, this giveaway closes Friday, March 17th, 2023, at a quarter to midnight. So get in there now, immediately, ASAP. The window is going to be closing on Friday night. Also, let me tell you, there is a huge library of free resources that you can go and just download, like 500 bucks or more worth of free resources to just go and download. Yeah, you have to sign up for people's email subscriptions, but you might get to know some really amazing people by doing so. And you don't know what you don't know. You might be missing out on something big. Go get in, dig into this, go see what you're missing for real, friend. Thank you so much for joining me today for this episode of Meant to Bloom. It really does mean the world to me. But are you ready to take this a step farther? Check out the description below of this episode and grab your mindset makeover. It's totally free, my gift to you. Then hop on Instagram and let me know what you thought of this episode. Tag me at Britt Clarkson, that's BritClarkson. If any part of this resonated with you, please let me know by tagging me or leave a review and share on social media so other mamas can find this too. If it helped you, it's going to help someone else. You're part of a movement now. Let's go.